The University of Sydney offers 450 different courses, but here's what the once proud institution is really teaching our kids. If you stomp your feet and hold your breath for long enough, you'll get what you want. Now, this will be dismaying news for mums and dads who spent years teaching their children that's not the way the world works, only to now spend a fortune having their children taught the very opposite at university. But how else should we interpret yesterday's stunning capitulation to students protesting Israel's pursuit of Hamas? These students, who've been camping out on the university's lawn since April 23, have demanded, among other things, that the university cut all ties with Israel. The irony, obviously, is that these same students sit on their tents scrolling on their iPhones, parts of which are made and assembled in Israel. If you're looking for consistency, I'd suggest an anti-Israel protest is probably not the place you're going to find it. But back to the students' demands.
For 11 days, this camp has stood at Sydney University in solidarity with similar protests globally.
But it's not about Mark Scott and the university management being happy that we're here. It's about making sure we can win our demands.
Those are for the university to cut ties with Israeli institutions and weapons manufacturers.
Free, free Palestine!
Well, it now seems that University Vice-Chancellor Mark Scott has all but given in to the collective temper tantrum. According to a report in today's Australian, Mark Scott has invited anti-Israel students to join a working group that will review the university's defence and security research ties. Here's what he told protesters. Student representatives of the encampment group would be invited to put forward names of individuals for membership in the working group. Seriously, can you believe that? Activists whose only qualification, as far as I can tell, is camping, will now help decide who the University of Sydney can and cannot work with. I'm just wondering, will the university's Jewish students be afforded the same opportunity? Do they also get a say on who the uni does business with? And what about my friend at Sydney University who'd like to review the institution's research ties with China? You know, on account of an actual genocide committed against the Uyghur people. Will he get a seat on Mr. Scott's working group? I suspect not. Mark Scott reportedly told students, these are students who have hijacked the once prestigious university campus, that his offer was the most comprehensive offer any anti-Israel activists had been given in Australia. Well, that's quite a boast. But it begs the question, why are anti-Israel activists being offered anything? I guess intimidating fellow students, disrupting classes and chanting antisemitic slogans pays off after all. But Mark Scott went even further, promising the university would provide increased opportunities for Palestinian scholars and students. Goodness me, why stop there? Why doesn't the University of Sydney offer, I don't know, students a Bachelor of Hamas while they're at it? And of course, Mark Scott offered to, quote, expand our truth-telling process in relation to Indigenous Australians because somehow, I don't know how, but apparently it's all connected. In an email to university staff, Mark Scott wrote, at the best of times, negotiating can be demanding and complex, even more so at a time of widespread distress and concerns held from diverse perspectives. It requires deep listening and respectful engagement. Indeed, Neville Chamberlain would have been impressed. But why is the university negotiating with protesters who, by Mark Scott's own admission, have hijacked lectures, failed to comply with directives, intimidated staff, and helped non-student rabble-rousers dodge security to access university buildings? This is insane. Actually, it's Marxism 101. Violence gets political results. This is what our nation's oldest university is now teaching. Rather than what Mr. Scott calls demanding and complex negotiation, he could try a little thing called leadership. How about having non-student activists charged with trespass and student activists being offered a choice to study or leave? If protesters don't like the taxpayer-funded universities' associations, they're always free to continue their degree in gender studies someplace else. But that would be far too adult, and the nation seems bereft of adults right now. So instead, Mark Scott has given student protesters until 3 p.m. tomorrow to respond. What do you think they'll do? Well, spoiler alert, we already know. Protest organisers told the Sydney Morning Herald last night that they'd voted to reject the deal, which they described as incredibly inadequate. And they posted on their social media today their intention to disrupt the university's Finance Committee meeting tomorrow morning.
Vice-Chancellor Mark Scott himself continues to sit idly by while our university has ties to help aid and abet and arm and fund that genocide. The millionaire chancellors and executives who run this university want to be able to have a nice little breakfast meeting tomorrow morning where they discuss where Sydney University puts its blood money.
This is an encampment of hundreds of students. We won't let that happen without a fight. We'll see you there tomorrow.
You see, here's the thing about appeasement. It never works. I know that, you know that, Israel knows that. You have to be highly educated to not know that. The more you reward bad behaviour, the worse behaviour you get. In a post on social media, Students for Palestine said, "We will not be participants in the Vice-Chancellor's spin campaign, and we will not settle for anything less than the cutting of all ties with Israel and weapons companies known to supply the IDF." And then, for good measure, they added, "Long live the student intifada." Those demanding and complex negotiations aren't going so well. But here's the real tragedy. The anti-Israel activists to whom Mark Scott is opening his tent, well, they'll be gone in 3 or 4 years. But the damage to the University of Sydney, that will last much longer.